and isolation. And it has really, in a way, a continuous thread with our prior discussions when we've been talking about how social processes work and how, indeed, how people come to believe in their way or the highway, how people can be ethnocentric and, in fact, almost always tend that way, and one kind of authority structure. The authority being the fact that, at least in some of the experimental settings, the person who's asking them to pull the switch, and of course he's asking them to pull the switch in a plausible way. There are anybody who has an ally. I should mention that in the Ash experiment, if you, in the little bit you saw, the person was utterly alone. That everybody disagreed and said how long the line was and miscalled it. And only one person, the person who was the actual subject of the experiment, was even tempted to say something different. Well, and who cares? And the same thing with Duck and Bunny. I didn't create anything controversial in this room by having the people who believe in ducks raise their hands compared to people who believe in bunnies. If I ask the same question about believing Gale named Stanley Milgram. And what Milgram did, and you all know this from your readings, is he put people in a room where they were told to pull the switch to deliver electrical shocks to someone who they thought was an innocent person just like them, who was actually a stooge working for the experimenter. And again, just like the stooges, we call the people who are hired by the experimenter, by the way, we call them stooges. And these experiments often have stooges, people who are actually working for the experimenter and generate through the group pressure this high degree of conformity. Now the other prevail. And among the explanations were things about, well, those are in effect, those are the Germans for you. That even though there's all this creativity that we see, there's something about being German that causes people to see the world in absolute terms, black and white, not gray, to make distinctions between the in-group, us Germans, and those outside of us. And immediately after the war, of course during the war itself, many people in the United States and the other countries that made up the Allied forces were very disturbed, to say the least, by what had happened in Germany. And what is Eichmann-esque. It seems as though from the way people respond to things like the Milgram experiment and the Ash experiment, that this tendency to conform, including to conform to authority, to go along, is very, very widespread, even in societies like ours. It might even be a special. That room, a room in a way not so different than the room you saw when I showed you the bit from the Ash experiment, except of course it's a big deal room with paintings on the wall, and in the White House, which in a way is bringing the kind of white-coated authority from the Milgram experiment into human interaction. But a human interaction which has of ending the war. And so this person, who is one of the most powerful people in the world, the Secretary of Defense, under one of our most powerful presidents we've ever had, Lyndon Johnson, was unable to make it go in the other direction. Now, I talked to you about just to conform. It's to conform. It's a profound process, a profoundly important process, which has its base in what it is to be human and to be socially involved in other people's lives and to see how they see the world is the way you see the world, and hence act accordingly. The way to get dignity in any situation, whether it's the White House cabinet room or it's on the street corner, the route to dignity is to display your allegiance, your lining up with other people who are like you and who make you able to have some dignity in the world. So what I've tried to do is to show the way that process works of conforming and how it works in all of these different settings. And in doing that, I'm trying to flag to you one of the ambitions of sociology, which is to see the way in which the same phenomenon, the same basic process, goes across settings. That it doesn't matter whether you're in the White House cabinet or you're hanging on the street corner. There are some goes on. That's the thing, I think, the ambition for you to look at and in a way, and look for, and in a way it's the ambition of a social science like sociology, is to discover processes and procedures that will be true across the board in Asia, in the United States, among whites, among blacks, among the rich, among the poor, in important places like the White House and what we take to be unimportant places like the street corner, that there are commonalities, and that is the heartland of the sociological mission, is to discover those processes.